Snowflakes danced lazily through the air, blanketing the small town of Winterville in a serene hush. The streets were alive with the festive chaos of last-minute shoppers darting between stores adorned with twinkling lights and wreaths. But amidst the bustle, in a quiet alley near the corner bakery, a small golden-furred dog sat curled up inside a battered cardboard box. His soft, pleading eyes, glowing amber under the Christmas lights, scanned the faces of passers-by, but no one stopped. The collar around his neck, frayed and slightly too tight, hinted at a life once lived with care. Now, he was alone. The night was growing colder. Shivers ran through the dog's thin frame as he tucked his nose under his tail, seeking what little warmth he could find. Around him, the joy of the holiday season seemed to mock his solitude. Families walked arm in arm, children clutching brightly wrapped presents, their laughter echoing through the streets. Yet for the small dog, this Christmas Eve felt like the loneliest night of his life. As the dog drifted into a restless sleep, he was startled by the sudden sound of laughter. A group of children, bundled in thick coats and scarves, had gathered near his alley. Their voices were loud, filled with excitement as they pointed at the bakery's window display. A gingerbread village complete with tiny sugar figurines. The dog perked his ears, hopeful. One of the children, a girl with red mittens and a curious gaze, noticed him. Her wide, hazel eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, he felt seen. "Mom!" the girl called, tugging on the hand of a tall woman carrying a bag overflowing with Christmas decorations. "There's a dog here. He looks cold." The woman glanced over her shoulder, her gaze briefly landing on the shivering animal. "Come on, Clara. We're already late for dinner at Grandma's," she said, her tone dismissive. "It's probably someone else's dog." Clara hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. She crouched down, extending a mittened hand toward the dog, who flinched slightly but didn't move away. "It's okay," she whispered softly. "I'll come back for you, I promise." But before she could do anything more, her mother pulled her away, and the group disappeared down the street. The dog watched them go, his hope fading as quickly as it had appeared. He lay back down, his small body trembling, but the girl's gentle voice lingered in his ears like an ember refusing to die out. The hours dragged on, and the streets of Winterville began to quiet. The once bustling town was now hushed, save for the occasional car humming past or the soft crunch of snow underfoot. The dog's breathing grew shallow, the bitter cold leaching away his strength. His eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion, but a faint light caught his attention. A figure was approaching, an older man bundled in a long wool coat and a knitted hat pulled low over his ears. His gait was slow, his breath visible in the icy air. The man stopped in front of the alley, his gaze falling on the small, shivering creature in the box. "Well, aren't you a sorry sight?" the man muttered, his voice gravelly but not unkind. He crouched down, pulling a piece of bread from his coat pocket. "Here. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." The dog sniffed cautiously before inching forward, his hunger overpowering his fear. As he took the bread, his tail wagged faintly, a small gesture of gratitude. The man chuckled softly. "You're not much for talking, huh? That's all right. Neither am I." The man stood, glancing around the empty street as though searching for someone else to take responsibility. But the silence answered his unspoken question. With a resigned sigh, he muttered, "Guess you're coming with me?" He reached down, scooping the dog into his arms. The animal stiffened at first, and used to such kindness, but the warmth of the man's embrace soon melted his hesitation. Together, they walked through the snow-covered streets, the glow of streetlights guiding their way. The man's house stood at the end of a quiet lane, a modest little cottage with a crooked mailbox and a wreath that had seen better days. Inside, the air was warm, scented faintly with pine and something metallic, perhaps from the old radiator humming in the corner. The man set the dog down gently, rummaging through a cupboard before placing a bowl of water and a mismatched plate of leftover meat on the floor. "There you go," he said, watching as the dog devoured the food with ravenous speed. "Don't worry, you'll be safe here tonight." The man settled into an armchair near a small, sparsely decorated Christmas tree. The lights on the tree blinked unevenly, casting a faint glow over the room. The dog, now full and slightly more relaxed, padded over to the man's feet and curled up into a tight ball. The man reached down, hesitating for a moment before scratching the dog behind the ears. "You're a quiet one," he murmured. "Guess I'll call you Buddy for now. That work for you?" The dog didn't react to the name, but his tail wagged softly as he drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep for the first time in what felt like forever. Outside, the snow continued to fall, muffling the world in a blanket of stillness. And for the man and the dog, this unexpected meeting was the start of something neither of them could have anticipated. A Christmas that would change everything. The scene ends with the man glancing at the window, where a single bright star seemed to shine more brilliantly than the rest, as if heralding a miracle yet to come. The sun rose slowly over Winterville, casting a soft golden light across the snow-covered rooftops. Inside the modest cottage at the end of the lane, the warmth of the morning was met with the quiet rustling of a small golden dog. Buddy stretched, his paws splayed out in front of him, before padding across the worn wooden floor. He looked up at the old man, Sam, who sat in the same armchair as the night before, now with a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. "Good morning, little guy," Sam muttered, his voice rough from years of disuse. Buddy wagged his tail in response, his amber eyes bright with gratitude. Sam chuckled lightly, the sound foreign even to himself. It had been years since laughter, however faint, had echoed through his home. Sam couldn't remember the last time he'd had company, much less the kind that didn't demand anything from him but kindness. His late wife, Margaret, had loved dogs, but Sam had never considered getting one after her passing. Life felt too heavy, too quiet. Yet now, with Buddy trailing after him, the silence of the house didn't seem so suffocating. As the morning stretched on, Sam set about his usual routine, reading the paper, checking the mail, and tidying up the small cottage. Buddy followed him at every turn, his tail wagging softly whenever Sam spoke. When Sam settled back into his armchair, Buddy hopped onto a patch of sunlight streaming through the window and curled up contentedly. But even as this quiet companionship began to feel natural, Sam was haunted by an uneasy thought. He'd seen the posters around town, handwritten notes pinned to telephone poles with a drawing of a dog that looked suspiciously like Buddy. One of them had even included a phone number. Sam had torn it down impulsively, stuffing it into his coat pocket before anyone could notice. He wasn't ready to part with Buddy. Not yet. Meanwhile, across town, Clara sat at her kitchen table, her brow furrowed as she colored in yet another missing dog poster. Her determination hadn't waned since spotting the shivering dog in the alley. Though her mother insisted they had done all they could, Clara wasn't convinced. "He looked so scared, Mom," she said for the third time that morning. "We can't just forget about him," her mother sighed, setting down her mug of tea. "Clara, we don't even know if he's still out there. He could belong to someone, or," she hesitated, "he might have been taken in already." Clara's face lit up. "Then we have to find out. What if he's with someone who doesn't take care of him? He needs us." Unable to argue with her daughter's resolve, Clara's mother finally agreed to let her post the flyers around town after their family Christmas party. Clara didn't mind the delay. As long as she was doing something, she felt a flicker of hope that she would see the dog again. Back at the cottage, Sam wrestled with his own moral dilemma. He knew he should call the number on the flyer tucked in his pocket, but every time he looked at Buddy, curled up on the rug or nudging his hand with a cold, wet nose, his resolve crumbled. Buddy had already become a fixture in Sam's life, filling the emptiness that had grown over the years. One afternoon, as snow began to fall again, Sam decided to take Buddy for a walk through the park. The air was crisp, and the pathways were lined with footprints and sled tracks. Children laughed and shouted as they built snowmen and slid down hills on brightly colored sleds. For the first time in years, Sam felt a small pang of happiness watching the simple joy around him. But their walk wasn't entirely peaceful. As Sam and Buddy passed a bulletin board near the park entrance, Sam's heart sank. Another poster stared back at him, the dog's sketched face a painful reminder of the decision he was avoiding. He quickly turned away, But Buddy's curious bark drew the attention of a young girl standing nearby. It was Clara. "Buddy!" Clara cried out, her voice filled with recognition and relief. She rushed over, her boots crunching against the snow. Sam froze as she dropped to her knees and threw her arms around the dog. Buddy wagged his tail excitedly, licking her face as though he remembered her. "Where did you find him?" Clara asked, looking up at Sam with wide, hopeful eyes. Sam hesitated, his voice caught in his throat. He could see the joy in Clara's face, but he could also feel Buddy pressing against his leg, as if seeking reassurance. "I found him in an alley," he said finally. "He looked like he needed a home." Clara nodded eagerly. "That's him. I've been looking everywhere for him. My mom said we couldn't take him, but I couldn't stop thinking about him." Sam's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her the truth, to admit that he had seen the posters and kept Buddy for himself. But before he could say anything more, Clara's mother appeared, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. "Clara, what's going on?" she asked, glancing between Sam and Buddy. Clara explained quickly, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. "He's the dog, Mom. The one I told you about. He's okay now. He's with this man." Her mother frowned, looking at Sam with guarded suspicion. "Is this your dog?" Sam swallowed hard, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "No," he admitted. "I found him a few nights ago. He was alone." Clara's mother studied him for a moment before sighing. "Well, it seems like he's been taken care of," she said, her tone softening slightly. "Clara, we should let him be. The dog seems happy where he is." Clara's face fell, but she nodded reluctantly. "Okay," she said quietly, giving Buddy one last pat on the head. "I just wanted to make sure he was safe." As they walked away, Sam felt a pang of guilt. He looked down at Buddy, who gazed back at him with trusting eyes. "You've got a past, haven't you?" Sam muttered. "And I suppose I'll have to face mine too." That night, as the cottage grew quiet again, Sam pulled the crumpled flyer from his pocket. The phone number stared back at him, daring him to call. Buddy nudged his hand, his tail wagging softly, and Sam sighed. "Maybe tomorrow," he whispered, though deep down, he wasn't sure if he meant it. The tension built as Sam wrestled with his choice, knowing that no matter what he decided, things could never go back to the way they were before Buddy entered his life. The wind howled outside Sam's cottage as another snowstorm swept through Winterville. Inside, the small house felt unusually warm, not because of the ancient radiator struggling against the chill, but because of Buddy. The golden dog had become the heart of the home, following Sam everywhere, whether it was fetching the morning paper or simply sitting by his feet as he read. Yet, the tension between Sam's newfound happiness and the nagging presence of the missing posters remained unresolved. That evening, as Sam ladled soup into a bowl, Buddy stood by the kitchen door, tail wagging and eyes bright. Sam chuckled. "You've got a good life now, don't you?" he said, setting a small plate of leftovers on the floor for Buddy. But even as Buddy ate, Sam's mind wandered back to the girl from the park, Clara, and the guilt that had grown sharper since their encounter. The flyer Sam had crumpled and stuffed into his coat pocket seemed to burn with accusation. He hadn't been able to throw it away, no matter how much he wanted to. It was still there, folded neatly now, on the small table by the front door. Every time Sam saw it, he was reminded that Buddy might belong to someone else, someone who missed him as much as Sam had come to love him. Across town, Clara wasn't giving up either. While her mother had brushed off their encounter with Sam, Clara's heart told her there was more to the story. "Mom, can we at least call the number on the posters again?" she asked one morning as they prepared breakfast. Her mother sighed. "Clara, it's Christmas Eve. You've done everything you can. If that dog has found a new home, maybe it's for the best. But what if he hasn't?" Clara countered, her hazel eyes wide with determination. "What if he's waiting for us to find him?" Her mother hesitated, sensing her daughter's unshakable resolve. "All right," she relented. "One last call. But after that, we focus on our family dinner tonight. Okay?" Clara nodded eagerly, already reaching for the phone. The number on the flyer belonged to the Winterville Animal Shelter, and the voice on the other end sounded tired but kind. "We haven't had any updates on the missing dog. the shelter worker explained. "But if you've seen him, you might want to talk to the people who reported him missing. They left their contact information here." Clara's mother wrote down the details, her expression softening as she watched her daughter's excitement grow. "Thank you," she said before hanging up. Clara grabbed the slip of paper and tucked it into her pocket, determined to do what she could. That afternoon, as Sam took Buddy for a walk through the neighborhood, the streets buzzed with the final rush of Christmas preparations. Families carried bundles of firewood, children built snow forts, and shopkeepers added last-minute decorations to their storefronts. Sam pulled his coat tighter around himself, his breath visible in the cold air, while Buddy trotted happily beside him, his tail wagging with every step. They passed the town's community center, where Clara's family was hosting their annual Christmas Eve dinner for neighbors and friends. Inside, Clara was helping her mother set up tables, but her thoughts kept drifting to the missing dog. She peeked out the frosted window and gasped. There, walking by, was Sam and Buddy. "Mom, he's outside," Clara cried, grabbing her coat and dashing out before her mother could stop her. She caught up to Sam just as he reached the end of the block. "Hi again," Clara said, slightly out of breath. Buddy barked in recognition, his tail wagging wildly as she knelt down to pet him. Sam smiled awkwardly, tipping his hat. "Out for another walk?" Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on Buddy. "He looks so happy," she said, her voice soft. "I just wanted to make sure he's okay." "He's more than okay," Sam replied, his tone gentler than he'd intended. "He's a good dog. Been a real blessing." Clara hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Have you called the number on the poster yet?" The question hit Sam like a gust of icy wind. He shifted uncomfortably, the truth sticking in his throat. "I haven't had the chance," he admitted. "Things have been busy." Clara's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe he belongs with you now," she said, surprising both Sam and herself. "But maybe you could call anyway, just to be sure." Sam felt a pang of shame. The girl was far braver than he was. "You're right," he said finally. "It's the right thing to do." Later that evening, Sam sat by the window, the phone clutched in his hand. Buddy lay at his feet, dozing peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing in Sam's heart. After several long minutes, Sam dialed the number on the flyer. The line rang twice before a man's voice answered. "Hello, this is Greg." Sam cleared his throat. "Hi, my name's Sam. I think I might have found your dog." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You've got Max?" the man asked, his voice sharp with surprise. Sam hesitated. "If Max is a golden dog with a frayed collar, then yes. He's been staying with me for a few days." Greg sighed, his tone softening. "That's him. He's been missing for over a week. My kids have been worried sick." Sam's chest tightened. He glanced down at Buddy, who looked up at him with trusting eyes. "He's safe," Sam said quietly, "and he's been a good companion." "Thank you," Greg said, his voice warm. "I can come by tomorrow to pick him up." Sam hung up the phone with a heavy heart. He stared at the Christmas tree in the corner of the room, its uneven lights blinking faintly, and wondered how he would say goodbye. But Christmas had other plans. The next morning, as the snow began to fall again, Greg arrived at Sam's cottage. He was a tall man with a kind face, and his gratitude was evident as he stepped inside. But as he knelt to greet Buddy, something unexpected happened. Buddy wagged his tail but stayed close to Sam, his body language hesitant. Greg noticed and frowned. "You've taken good care of him," he said. "Maybe too good. He seems attached to you." Sam's heart ached. "He's been a comfort," he admitted. "But if he's your dog, I understand." Greg paused, glancing between Buddy and Sam. "Maybe it's time for him to start over," he said after a moment. "You've given him a home, and it seems like that's what he needs." Sam stared, surprised. "Are you sure?" Greg smiled. "Merry Christmas, Sam." As Greg left, Sam knelt beside Buddy, who leaned into him with a soft whimper. "Looks like you're sticking around," Sam said, his voice breaking. "Merry Christmas, Buddy." Outside, Clara watched from her window, a smile spreading across her face. It seemed that Christmas had brought Buddy home after all. Christmas morning dawned softly over Winterville, the first rays of sunlight casting a golden hue across the fresh blanket of snow. Sam sat in his favorite armchair, gazing out the window as the world outside slowly came to life. Buddy lay curled at his feet, his soft snoring filling the warm silence of the room. For the first time in years, Sam felt a deep sense of peace, though it was tinged with the bittersweet realization of how close he had come to losing this small, golden miracle. The events of the previous evening still lingered in Sam's mind. Greg's decision to let Buddy stay had been unexpected, a gift Sam hadn't dared hope for. Yet, as grateful as Sam felt, a tiny voice in the back of his mind wondered if he truly deserved Buddy. He had found solace in the dog's presence, but was it enough? Could he offer Buddy the life he deserved? Across town, Clara was already awake, her excitement bubbling over as she raced down the stairs to the living room. The Christmas tree sparkled with twinkling lights, and beneath it lay an assortment of neatly wrapped presents. Yet, as her parents entered the room, still groggy from the early hour, Clara wasn't focused on the gifts. Instead, she turned to her mother with a determined look. "Mom, can we go see Mr. Sam today?" she asked. Her mother frowned slightly, confused. "Clara, it's Christmas morning. Don't you want to open your presents first?" Clara shook her head. "I'll open them later. I just want to check on him and Buddy." "Please," Clara's father chuckled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're persistent, kiddo. All right, after breakfast, we'll stop by." Back at Sam's house, the day unfolded quietly. He prepared a simple breakfast, sharing bits of toast with Buddy, who wagged his tail happily at every crumb. Sam chuckled as Buddy nudged his hand for more. "You've got no manners, do you?" he said affectionately. "I suppose that's my fault." But the tranquility of the morning was soon interrupted by a knock at the door. Sam hesitated, unsure of who would visit him on Christmas Day. With Buddy trotting at his heels, he opened the door to find Clara and her parents standing on the porch, bundled against the cold and holding a tray of cookies. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Sam," Clara exclaimed, her cheeks pink from the cold and excitement. Sam blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. "Well, Merry Christmas to you too," he said finally, stepping aside to let them in. "What brings you all the way out here?" Clara grinned as she knelt down to greet Buddy, who greeted her with an enthusiastic lick. "We just wanted to make sure you and Buddy were having a good Christmas," she said simply. Sam felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to visitors, let alone people who seemed to care about him. "That's kind of you," he said, his voice rough. "It's been a good day so far." As Clara's parents set the tray of cookies on the kitchen counter, they exchanged a glance. "Clara's been talking about you and Buddy nonstop," her mother admitted with a small laugh. "She thought you might like some company today." Sam smiled faintly. "Company's always welcome." The afternoon passed in a haze of laughter and warmth. Clara and Buddy played together in the living room, her laughter filling the space in a way that made Sam's heart feel lighter than it had in years. Her parents helped Sam string up extra lights on his Christmas tree, transforming it from a sparse decoration into a cheerful centerpiece. For the first time, the house felt alive, not just with sound, but with the undeniable energy of love and connection. As the sun began to set, Sam found himself sitting at the kitchen table with Clara's parents. "I don't know how to thank you for this," he said quietly. "It's been a long time since this house has felt like home." Clara's father nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes it just takes the right people, or the right dog, to remind us what home feels like." Sam glanced over at Buddy, who was now lying on his back, paws in the air, as Clara scratched his belly. "He's been a gift I didn't know I needed," Sam admitted. That evening, after Clara and her family had left, Sam sat by the fire with Buddy at his side. The small dog rested his head on Sam's lap, his golden fur glowing in the firelight. Sam stroked Buddy's ears absently, his thoughts drifting to Margaret. She had always loved Christmas, filling the house with music and laughter. For years after her passing, the holiday had been a painful reminder of her absence. But now, for the first time, it felt like the season had brought something back, a sense of purpose, a flicker of joy. "Thank you," Sam murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't sure if he was speaking to Buddy, to Clara, or to something greater. Maybe it was all of them. As the night deepened, a A single bright star shone over Winterville, casting its gentle light over the quiet town. Sam stood by the window, looking out at the snow-covered street. Buddy sat at his feet, his head resting on Sam's leg. "You know," Sam said softly, "I think this might be the best Christmas I've ever had." Buddy's tail thumped against the floor in agreement. The story ends with the sound of faint laughter echoing from a distant house, a reminder that even in the darkest seasons, light and love can find their way in. Christmas had brought Sam and Buddy together, but more importantly, it had brought them both back to life. And in the quiet glow of the fireplace, Sam realized he wasn't just grateful for Buddy. He was grateful for the second chance they'd given each other. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. If you were moved by the story of the canine hero and the spirit of Christmas that transformed lives, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what you thought of this exciting journey.